Then let's get started. Welcome everyone to today's webinar, Bills as Weapons, A Natural History of Hummingbirds, featuring Dr. Alejandro Rico-Guevara and Dr. Kristiina Hurme, who I will introduce more fully in a moment. My name is Jessie Rack. I'm the program director at the Natural History Institute here in Prescott, Arizona, where we just got a good amount of snow last night. It's fabulous. I first wanted to say a couple of words about the Institute for those who are not familiar with our work. So we're a mission-based, independent nonprofit organization based here in Prescott, Arizona. Our mission is to provide leadership and resources for revitalized practice of natural history, integrating art, sciences, and the humanities. And so we believe that everybody can participate in the practice of natural history, and that by so doing, they can learn to care for the world, and in return, reap the mental and physical health benefits of nature. I want to bring your attention. I see there's some audio feedback. Is anyone else having audio feedback, or is that just it might be your computer if no one else is hearing that. I'm sorry about that. So I wanted to bring your attention to a couple of resources that the Institute has to offer. One is our website, which my colleague Jenny just dropped in the chat there. So it's naturalhistoryinstitute.org. All sorts of information on there, including about upcoming programs. If you're not in Prescott, that's okay. All of our in-person talks, we live stream as well as these webinars. So even if you're not in the area, you can check them out. Next up, we have a talk by Dr. Gary Beverly on March 16th, describing the extensive efforts by many organizations to protect the Upper Verde River in Northern Arizona. And on April 19th, we have the final installment of this Science and Conversation or Science and Communication webinar series, A Natural History of Climate Change, featuring a conversation with Dr. Mark Urban. He is an EEB professor at the University of Connecticut and the director of the new Center for Biological Risk there at UConn. I also wanted to say that if you're all so inclined as to consider supporting the work of the NHI, like all small nonprofits, it's a labor of love. Our executive director literally shovels the sidewalks himself. So your support is so necessary. Help us keep the lights on. On the homepage of the website, you can donate if you want, but if not, that's okay. We got free stuff for you anyway. A couple of things real quick about how we're going to work the logistics of the program here today in terms of Zoom protocols. So a lot of people have been saying hello through the chat. Thank you for doing that. I love seeing where you're all watching from. To let you know, we will be turning off the chat function momentarily because we find it's a little distracting if people are chatting back and forth during the program. So that'll be off. In its place, we will be using the Q&A function, which is also at the bottom of the screen there on the right side. If you look, you'll see a little icon that's like a cartoon speech bubble, and that will be on through the whole program. So that anytime you have questions for our speakers or a comment you'd like to make, we'll save 10 or 15 minutes at the end to visit those later in the day. Also, if you see someone has asked a question or made a comment that's along the lines of what you were going to ask, instead of asking the same thing, there's like a little thumbs up icon so you can upvote it, and then we'll see that a lot of people really want to see the answers to some questions. Finally, this program will be recorded and available on the Natural History Institute's YouTube channel. It's live streaming there now. I will do a little edit, trimming off the beginning where people are filing in tomorrow, and then that'll be up in edited form right afterward. So please check that out and share it with all your friends if you're so inclined. So now it is my great pleasure and honor. I'm so delighted that they are zooming in from Colombia. Live from Colombia, it's Kristiina and Alejandro. So let me give them a little introduction here. So we'll start with Kristiina alphabetically. Dr. Kristiina Hurme is a behavioral ecologist who has studied fish, monkeys, birds, and frogs in the Neotropics. She aims to observe animals in their natural environment, uses observations or video recording to monitor and catalog their behaviors. Her graduate research is really cool. It's like tadpole schooling. I think about it a lot still. So ask her those questions later if you get tired of hummingbirds. And Kristiina is very into natural history, wishes it was still studied with the splendors in the 19th century. She loves using citizen science platforms like iNaturalist. Dr. Hurme is currently an assistant teaching professor in the Department of Biology at the University of Washington in Seattle, where she shares a love of natural history with her students. And on my right, our right, I guess, Dr. Alejandro Rico-Guevara is a biologist from Colombia. He completed his PhD at the University of Connecticut, as did I, and where he was supported by a Fulbright scholarship and subsequently completed a postdoc at UC Berkeley. He's authored 21 peer-reviewed publications, 16 as first author, 6 have been highlighted on journal covers. And there's also a ton of his research has been featured by the news media and in 6 nature documentaries. This hummingbird stuff is really cool. And Alejandro believes that biologists have both the privilege to learn about the wonders of nature and the responsibility to share what they've learned with scientists and non-scientists. So a couple of major science communicators in the house today. Love to see it. Welcome, you guys. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure to be here. I'm super excited about the questions and to share our knowledge with everyone.
Yes, and I hope we'll have a chance at some point today to let you share your screen and maybe show some cool, I don't know, images or video, because I love some hummingbird videos.
Might have some of those.
Yes, fantastic. Well, let's get started. I kind of have like a question, a more broader, since I am here at the Natural History Institute. I kind of want to start with a grounding natural history question. So here at the Natural History Institute, we have a specific definition of natural history. And so I'm going to tell it to you just to kind of give you an orientation. So we consider natural history to be a practice. So it's very important that it's something you do. A practice of intentional, focused attentiveness and receptivity to the more than human world, guided by honesty and accuracy. So I'd love to hear how you both define natural history and where you see it in your work.
Yeah, totally. So we are absolutely super advocates of natural history. I think that is what really grounds research questions. And I'm a curator. I'm the curator of birds in a natural history museum. So I'm the curator of birds at the Burke Museum of Natural History and Culture. And to me, that was our first connection as humans to try to understand the old natural wonders that are around us. And it's still alive because we cannot move forward with science if we don't ask the right questions, and the right questions should be grounded in observing what is around us. And yeah, that to me is the most important part of it.
I like that because it very much, oh, I'm sorry, I just interrupted you. Sorry, I'll let you go in a second, Kristiina, I'm sorry. I was just gonna say, I love that because it really speaks to what we do as well, like this practice of like the observation. So sorry, Kristiina, go. I'd love to.
I was just gonna continue with the observation, and that the act of observing organisms, be plants or animals, but at the individual level in where they exist and see how they interact with other organisms is, to me, the starting place and what I do just naturally for fun. And I try to make sure that everyone can do that, because you don't have to be in Colombian jungles. You could be on the edge of a parking lot and still see organisms doing really cool things. And so we try to make sure that everyone can open their eyes to be able to observe animals and plants all around them all the time.
I love that. I love that. And I think that very, very much like speaks to our definition as well, right? It's something you're doing, something you can do anywhere, and something anyone can do. So I love that natural history, to me, it almost feels like more accessible than like science, because science sounds scary, but it's also all science to me. It's all natural history. I think at the bottom, it's all physics, I think, but so I would love to hear from you both, because I know you both had kind of very different upbringings and ways to come to science. I'd love to hear a little bit of your personal pathways of becoming ecologists. And if I can be a little like flowery, maybe trace the path of you falling in love with the world and with hummingbirds and with frogs and nature.
Yeah, totally. Well, I can go, since we're in Colombia, and I feel that here is where everything started for me, of course. The path that brought me to biology was mostly starting during weekend trips. So with my family, we would be doing all sort of different stuff, like each one of us, but when we got together and on the weekend, went to just have lunch on the side of the road and then go off and see what was around there. I think my dad was the one that was a natural historian, just not by career, but by heart. I would just follow him, and we started discovering things because neither of us knew a lot about those things, but we were both as fascinated. So I think that is where everything started for me when I was little. And then I had the fortune of studying in a university, a public university, Universidad Nacional de Colombia, which is the major public university here, that brings people from all over the country with all different backgrounds. And that, because it's government supported, we had the chance to do a lot of field trips. So my field trips for my courses were in the Amazon, in the Paramos, like going all up and down the mountain. Like when you go half an hour up the mountain, the weather feels different, the plants are different, everything is different. So that to me was super important to, kept me going. And then that's what I decided to pursue, the academic path, which to me is just keep asking questions and keep, fueling that passion for discovering nature. And yeah, that's why I'm here.
Tell them what animals you studied first.
Oh, right. So my path was all over the place. I started with sperm whales because, I had that like fascination of crazy animals that you read about in books and everything. So my favorite animal was sperm whale.
I did not know that. Thank you
I
for
know,
telling me.
he doesn't tell people very often, but
Why wouldn't you tell people that? That's like what I would lead with.
It's just like past history, I guess.
Just Alejandro,
old news.
My life before that. So I dove a lot. I follow these animals in the coast of Chile with scientists, but I quickly realized that the life of a sailor wasn't for me. So I had more interaction with the things that I really cared deeply about. So I then studied spiders. I went to an island near the Pacific coast of Colombia called Gorgona. And there we just trapped spiders for 3 months. We found a new spider that I named after my professor at that time, who introduced me to spiders. And then
discovered a new spider also and named. This is all turning into a whole different webinar than where I thought we were.
I know. Again, it's natural history, right? It's just like being fascinated by anything and everything.
I love that. Sorry to interrupt again. I just had
No, it's
reaction
great.
shot.
And then on one of those trips to the Amazon, one of my professors, the bird professor, is an American that moved to Colombia to study hummingbirds because there's so much diversity here. So he was just as passionate as I was, but on a different group. And then we started going back and forth, questions. And then he had a lot of answers, but then those answers generated more questions. And I thought that was super fascinating. And I ended up studying how hummingbirds catch spiders, the link and other things.
Full circle.
Yeah. Now you.
My turn. Well, I think I always loved animals, but I definitely benefited by my mom taking me to the zoo almost every day when I was little. So there was constant exposure to wildlife. And so it was just kind of a given that I would be a biologist or study animals because that's what I loved. But I struggled a lot taking classes where it was just about cells or we weren't really dealing with organisms. And it wasn't until my junior year in college, I went to Princeton and we had this privilege to go to Panama for a whole semester. And suddenly I was there, kind of like Alejandro, like getting to see the animals we'd learned about in the textbooks. And then finally things clicked and I started to do really well and finally get good grades. Because I was there and I could just be immersed in it. And so that moment really changed my life. And so then I've been able to keep coming back to the tropics many times. I had to volunteer for lots of projects, but I studied fish in streams, I studied birds, and I studied monkeys in zoos. And then when I decided I wanted to keep doing it, but maybe get paid for once, kind of, so I got paid as a grad student, which is basically not being paid. But I decided that birds get up too much early in the morning for me. But frogs, I caught my whole life, and I could kind of stay up late. So that was kind of fun. So I found a professor who happened to be like the world expert in frog behavior. And that brought me to Connecticut to do my PhD with Kent Wells. And then I was able to go back to Panama to study a frog no one had really studied, and it didn't work out too well. But I got to see lots of cool stuff and follow frogs around in swamps at night. And then as I was finishing my PhD, I met Alejandro, and he told me about his hummingbirds, and I had a background in like, studying behavior. And so we were able to merge our two paths by me helping him train hummingbirds to just naturally come to the feeders, as opposed to being caught and kind of put in cages and kind of waiting to see who was gonna, be more stubborn and finally use the feeder. So now we have this crazy setup where we have hundreds of wild birds that just come happily to our experiments and then fly away, and it all works really well. So we keep doing the behavior that I love, and we're able to match it with all the stuff that Alejandro does.
I love that your two stories just ended up like wrapping together. It was so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with us. I loved, Alejandro, I loved what you said about your dad being a natural historian in his heart. And I was thinking about that like the whole time both of you were talking, because I mean, not the whole time.
He has like feathers and shells and seeds and
my dad.
Yes, not all.
Yeah.
Still, like on our farm in Colombia, it's just like little natural history trinkets. It's his own collections all the time.
I love that. That's so relatable. And I think that's what makes it so accessible, right? Natural history is just out there for everyone to like be a part of. And I love that about it. So thank you so much. Also, I totally identify with I can't be a bird person because I hate getting up early. Herps all the way, baby. Night surveys.
Oh, I studied wrens and we had to get up at 3:30 and it was just ungodly. And I cried every morning and I was like, sorry.
Oh my gosh. I did I did 2 yellow-billed cuckoo surveys out here. And I was like, this is horrible. I can't. The second time I just camped out because I didn't want to have to drive out. Anyway.
You got to be realistic about like what works for you. And
I know, herpetologist, just night stuff for me. Well, thank you for sharing that. I really love having kind of a background of how people get inspired to do science and get into science and where their questions are coming from. And I love how kind of broad and generalist you both started and probably still are, and how that kind of like narrowed into your current work though. Which brings me to kind of the main theme of what I'd like to talk about. So I have a really broad question for you. I was going to just be like, what's a hummingbird? But I think I'd like to say, what is so special about hummingbirds broadly before we get into your research, and why should we care about them?
I think you can go.
So hummingbirds are the tiniest dinosaurs. I think that's what is so amazing about them. There was recently some debate about that, but I think that was solved, and now we're back, and that hummingbirds are the tiniest dinosaurs that have existed, and they are super relatable because they have these extremely bold personalities, especially shocking because they're that tiny. So you would expect these small animals to be super afraid and super skittish, but they can get used to be around you. And I think part of it is their extreme skill about flying. So they know that they can be really close to you, but you would never be able to grab them because, to them, I think we move in slow motion. Instead of like, like we're like doing this and they are just like flying back and forth many times. So I think that's fascinating about them, their personality, and all of the extreme morphology and physiology that they have is, from the scientific point of view, an example of how evolution has been pushed. I think hummingbirds are great at doing that, at pushing all the boundaries of what is capable, what an organism is capable of doing. So, everything from very tiny genomes, because of their fast metabolism, their blood cells have to be really tiny, and then that is a down chain to get those genomes super depurated and very slim. So that makes them fascinating on that realm. On the realm of flying, they have capabilities that no other birds have in terms of being able to spin really fast, being able to fly backwards, being able to accelerate really fast and stop as well. In the realm of feeding, like the efficiency that they have and how their builds have coupled with the flowers and coevolution. I mean, I could talk about these forever, right? But yeah, what do you think is fun about them?
I think how you mentioned they were relatable, that, you can find them in gardens, they come to flowers, they're not afraid of us. And so it's something that people can connect to really easily. And it's easy to fall in love with hummingbirds. And then it just happens to be great that the more we study them, we find these really cool things we can answer about them that people kind of be surprised about. So I hope to tell you more.
Oh, that's so cool. I didn't know half of the things you just said.
So I have it down to.
Yeah. So when you say tiny genomes, you mean like very few genes, like not that much DNA, like literally they don't have that much, like no genetic diversity, or
So to me, it's sort of like the genome has been like, I don't know the right word, depurporated or purified or, filtered out to keep only the most essential parts because of the constraints, the metabolic constraints. So that means that to some degree, it's easier to study adaptations in them because the genetic material they keep is what they absolutely need.
Oh, that's so fascinating. It's curious then that people don't do more kind of genetic studies with hummingbirds. I guess they're probably hard to breed in the lab. They're not like fruit flies. So, okay, forget I said that. But I mean, theoretically, it would be really interesting to kind of do that kind of work. Cool. Well, you also, something else I kind of picked up on was you talked about their feeding efficiency. And I was hoping you would talk about that or mention that, because I know we all went to graduate school together, if you couldn't tell. And so I know in graduate school, that was kind of your work was on hummingbird feeding mechanics and hummingbird tongues. Could you share a little bit about this? Because I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, totally. As Jesse mentioned, that was my dissertation. So that was my central project for my PhD studies. And it was hard at the beginning because although I did my PhD with an expert on feeding mechanics, Margaret Rubega, she was my advisor. We were looking into how they actually drink nectar because, and the reason why we got to that question is when you think about hummingbirds, everything from the small size, from how fast they move, from the bills that are the quintessential feature of a hummingbird, everything makes sense when you think that they feed from nectar. And everything in their ecology and evolution down to their daily lives revolves around feeding on flowers and drinking nectar. But when we started looking into how they were taught to drink nectar, there were some inconsistencies. So the main theory was capillary action, which is the same process in which you take a very thin glass tube and then you touch a liquid surface like water with it, then the liquid rises really quickly up that tube. In morphology, when they were doing the studies about how the hummingbird tongues look like, they found that indeed they were tiny tubes. So the conjecture was, okay, well, they tiny tubes, and then there is physical process called capillarity. They feed through capillarity. But then when you contrast that with natural history observations, again, like their behavior, what they do if they, prefer to feed upside down or upright, or how fast they lick, then all of those details didn't quite match the fact or the thought that they were drinking through capillary action. So it was really hard to study because to discover what they actually do, you need to first get really close, right? Like we're talking about tiny tongues, like as thick of a nylon filament. And then what happens inside the flower is super concealed. by all of these, petals and sometimes bracts. And so to overcome all of these things, I designed, like almost like jewelry, glass feeders, like working on miniature scales to sort of mimic those flowers that they would feed from. And then I put high-speed cameras with macro lenses that were only available when I was starting my PhD. So it was sort of like pushing the edge of what was possible to do, and then discovering that it was not capillarity, that it was like a super complex dynamic action of the tongue in which you were going to ask something, Jesse?
Oh, I was going to let you finish your sentence first. No, go ahead, and then I'll ask.
No, and so it just blew my mind when I saw those first videos that I took. So I took the video. I thought, okay, now let's see what is happening. And when I was seeing it there, I just couldn't believe, like that what was I actually, seeing that these songs were capable of doing that you didn't think it was possible.
Oh, and on that cliffhanger, which I'm hoping you're going to tell us what you saw, because
Right.
So I just wanted to kind of clarify and sum up. Okay, so hummingbird tongues are tiny tubes like a straw. It's like when you're a kid, you stick your straw into your soda and then like squirt it at your friend, like that. Like when you stick your thumb over it. Did you do that?
I did that, yeah, but they only look like that when they're dried and not in liquid.
So people saw them when they were dead and thought they were tubes like straws, and that was how they drank, because they were too fast and nobody could see them doing it in real life.
And the reason Alejandro was able to disprove this like 100 or 200-year-old theory was because of natural history, because we went out in Colombia and we filmed hummingbirds drinking at flowers, and we counted that they drank 20 times per second. And then he got the help of people to make calculations. In capillarity, you could never fill a tube that fast. So it was just matching what the birds are doing in the flower. We couldn't even see in the flower. We just saw how fast they were licking, and that was not possible to match capillarity. So we had to figure out what else was going on. And so it was that.
When he saw it, his mind was blown. And then what happened?
Right. So one thing. It is like a straw. So the hummingbird tongues look like straws, like two straws stuck together. Only the second half of them. So if you imagine if my hand is the whole tongue, only up to here is hollow, but the rest is totally filled with tissue. So although they look like a straw, they cannot be used as a straw because they cannot suck through them.
Because it would all fall out when it got halfway up.
Right, exactly. There is no way that the pressure can be transferred through that tube, because it's not like well, many reasons, right? Birds don't have cheeks and so on and so forth, but also the tube is sort of filled midway. So is not, it is a tube, but that cannot be used as straw. So it's complicated. Okay.
So what was happening instead?
So what was happening is that, so you have, this is the nectar surface, and these are the tubes that, like imagine the tubes are coming like this. And when those tubes are inside the liquid, they open up. So they relax, and the two sides split sideways, like, forked tongues, like snakes. So you see this little like snake tongue opening up and closing up. And inside all of those tubes, which have fringes at the ends too, like my fingers, relax. And then when they were pulling back up, they would close. And that closing traps little drops of nectar in each, fringe. And that was, the first big discovery.
And it was the physics of the tongue leaving the surface of the nectar that closes it. So it's not like the hummingbird is using muscles or anything. It's just the process of leaving the bubble of nectar that makes the tongue close up.
Oh, thank you for saying that, because I was picturing like a chameleon tongue being like, like.
Right. Yeah. No, that's an excellent point. So that's why there has been so much attention from the, biomimics world on this process, because it's basically like a free trap in the sense that it doesn't need extra energy to close those fringes. It's just by the action of the surface tension of the nectar interacting with those structures that closes the trap. So when you look at the cross section, so for my PhD, I did histology and I did, I split tons of, salvage specimens, and I did electron microscopy and many other studies. And what I found is that this part that is a tube in the tongue doesn't have any muscles, doesn't have any nerves. It's basically keratin. And that was the other cool thing, is the same material that feathers are made of. So imagine that the tongue of a hummingbird is sort of like feather-like, very thin, and just very flexible, being able to change, not by muscles, but just interaction with the nectar.
And by being so tiny and so thin that it's able to use physics just to close it and open it. Something that would be harder if it was much larger, but because it's so tiny.
Right.
And to be clear, you were the first person to find this, right? Ever in the world.
That's correct. Yes.
No wonder you're on all the nature documentaries. That's so cool. Well, thank you for telling me about that. I love that story, and just the power of natural history and kind of solving that problem too.
And there is more. Like if you're interested, we have a paper in the conversation that we wrote together. Is an article. It's a general public article to disseminate these discoveries in an accessible way, so people don't have to go and read the scientific papers. And the other part is that what happens outside the nectar is what we call a micropump, which is using the compression of the tongue. So because they cannot be used as straws, they need to squeeze it. And by squeezing it to keep the nectar inside and pull the tongue out again, they compress the tissue. And when that tissue that is compressed touches the nectar, pops open, and that fills the rest of the tongue with nectar. So it's like a two-part process that is just like extremely fast and extremely, mind-blowing if you think about it.
That is so fascinating.
Yeah.
So thank you for explaining that. That's very cool. And I think I see questions popping up, which we'll get to at the end. Just a reminder to everyone listening out there, the Q&A function's open this whole time. So if you want to type something in because you don't think you'll remember it, just throw it in there now and I'll get to it. So the title of this webinar was Bills as Weapons. So how do we get from tongues to bills? How did you get there? How does that work?
So he was trying to figure out how the tongue in the nectar can trap the nectar and then pull it into the bill, and how the hummingbird can actually keep the nectar in the bill and swallow it. And so it turns out that in order for all this to work, you need to have a nice bill that fits together, kind of concave and has no gaps on the sides. And that's the most efficient way to get nectar from a flower onto the tongue, into the bill, and then down the throat. So he was able to publish that this is the most efficient way hummingbirds can drink. And then just by going to museums and looking at natural history collections and looking at hummingbirds in Colombia, where there's 300 and something species and a lot of diversity, we saw some really weird hummingbirds where the males only had daggers and spines on the tips of their bills. And we thought, how is that supposed to drink nectar? Like there's gaps on the sides, so doesn't the nectar just shoot out? And so we started looking into this very carefully. And there's another thing that Alejandro was the first person to discover, was that hummingbirds seem to have weapons on the tips of their bills. But the group of hummingbirds that are most common in the United States and North America, that clade of hummingbirds don't have weapons. So it's not something that people saw very often, because you had to be in the Neotropics looking at, hummingbirds from Colombia or Brazil. And then there, a few species, you would see these bills. So it wasn't like something that was really widespread that people didn't notice. It was that you had to go look for certain species and then notice the males were different than the females. And so it was kind of nested, but he was able to find that thanks to the biodiversity in Colombia.
Oh, that's fascinating. So even though there's a lot of hummingbirds here in Arizona, they're not, even if they'd like go after each other and seem like it's not the same thing as having a specialized weapon. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
And that's a great point. All hummingbirds fight.
Yeah.
They're all jerks, all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. People like to see them as, like fairies, little fairies in the gardens and stuff, but we see them as like little fencers more, like, little Soros just going after each other and really using their bills as swords. And you see them sometimes just, like going and trying to dodge each other and trying to poke each other. And then some species would have evolved these modifications to exert like a higher amount of damage when they poke each other. So you see hummingbirds in the US around feeders, and you see them and they would poke each other. But if you have modifications that when you poke you can hurt more, then that would be favored. And the question that we are still trying to answer is why in some species and not in others? Why in some places and not in others? And that's what we're moving forward right now on trying to answer.
Oh, fascinating. Do you have any images of bills? I want to see weird hummingbird bills.
Sure.
Yeah, he'll look up a picture. But we also want to understand like what makes a really good male. Like the male that's dominant at the feeder probably has the best weapons, which we'll see in a moment. But then he has to overcome the cost of drinking nectar with this ridiculous bill. So it's probably much harder for this individual, like at the top here. This is a male sparkling violet ear. And so you can see the female at the bottom has the concave kind of curved down bill. And so that would close nicely and make a nice seal over the tongue. But at the top, when he closes that bill, there's a big gap because he has those daggers and he has these spines, which we call serrations. And so we're trying to put the cost of being the male that gets access to all the flowers because you're the biggest bully, but it's probably a little bit harder to drink nectar. But it seems to be worth it in these groups because they're able to, we see the evolution of these traits a lot in certain groups. And so we don't know why in some groups and not others.
So sexually dimorphic here in that the females and males are shaped different, right?
That is correct. So sexually dimorphic meaning that the males, the adult males, would have these like modified morphology if you take into account most hummingbirds, and the females would look more like the usual morphology that you see in most hummingbirds. Here is not possible to tell in the picture, but the bill tips of females are very soft. So even a touch, they would bend slightly, like if you gently touch them with the tip of your finger, you don't feel much, right? But if you feel the tip of a male in your finger, it's very easy to poke yourself or to pierce yourself. They're like little needles, pretty much.
What?
Super stiff, yeah.
Oh, I had no idea they were that actually like weaponized.
They are. Actually, one of our assistants caught one and the male stabbed her and it drew blood. We were like, oh, hummingbird beat you up.
Yeah.
Also, did I hear you correctly that these were the violet sparkle something?
Sparkling violet ears. They're beautiful and their feathers are just like glistening and they have these little ears that are purple, and then when they scream at each other, they like put them forward. They're very loud, obnoxious, and beautiful.
I mean, no wonder people think they're fairies, though, if you're thinking of names like that.
Yeah. And interestingly, in this species, you cannot tell males and females apart. So they look very much alike. But through our studies, we found this way in which you can easily tell if it is a male or a female by how the bill tip looks like.
So now whenever I see a picture a photographer took, we zoom in and we look at the bill tips and we're like, that's an amazing male, or like, oh, it's female. So I mean, you can see that too now. Some of these species have like daggers on the tips of their bills.
Oh, that's fascinating. And so how much do we know about hummingbird weapons so far? How many species have it? Like, how widespread is it? What's going on? Are they different? Like, are there big scary ones like saber-toothed tiger hummingbirds? Like, what? Should I be scared?
Pull up another slide here.
Yeah.
What? There's saber-toothed tiger hummingbirds?
There's some very extreme ones.
They're not very common, but there are some hooks and some serrations, which we're going to show you right now.
Oh my goodness.
And so this is,
Boom.
I think you got to do the present screen.
Boom.
Oh.
Can you see it?
Oh.
So this is a phylogeny of all hummingbirds. And if it's in red, this is what we would assume is a normal hummingbird. So right now we're just looking at the serrations, and they all have some slight serrations for drinking nectar. So that's just like the original condition. But when we see these groups in black, this is, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but there's one up here on the top right called Colibri cruscans, and that is the sparkling violet ear. So that clade, everyone within that group has also evolved some sort of weapon. And so you can see it's evolved multiple times within the hummingbird tree, but it's not that common. And so there's been a few separate times it's evolved. And then you can see some examples of different birds around the edges. And the top right is a really cool one.
Oh my gosh.
The
Saber-tooth.
Yeah, the saber-tooth.
It's called the tooth-billed hummingbird, I think, right?
Yep.
Androdon. And so this one, that's the male. And so it's got this ridiculous hook. And
Oh my
The
goodness.
serrations are huge. Yeah.
but then on the top left, you would see just what you would expect a normal hummingbird bill, where you see slight serrations, but it's not anything too scary.
Normal meaning like normal in the groups that have this, not like
Right,
I
like
would see that.
most hummingbirds have that kind of bill shape.
Oh. Oh, like most, like,
Some version of serrations, but small and not
Oh.
very.
oh, I didn't know that. Oh, that's so cool. But they're not like evolved into weapons. They're just like some version of it.
Correct.
Oh, that's cool.
They kind of help with the overlap of the bills when they drink.
Yeah, I don't know if you can see these very well, but this is how most serrations help during the drinking. They just act like wipers to clean
okay.
them out when it's going out.
Right, they kind of trap the nectar in there, just the extra surface tension, so it's not going to squirt out the sides.
Oh, fascinating.
So this would be an example of a bill that fits together perfectly to
Right.
efficiently drink nectar. So you can imagine if you have a big hook on the end, that this process is not going to work very well.
Yeah, I want to see the saber-tooth trying to do this.
I
Well,
know,
we
right?
do too, but we don't have that video yet.
Where do they live?
In Colombia,
The
Oh.
Pacific coast, the Chocó region is called.
Okay, so
Yeah, we have
what are we doing with our time?
what are you doing? Yeah, I'm just kidding.
But we are lucky that those violet ears also have good weapons come to our farm readily, where we have a small research station where we study hummingbirds. So with all of our equipment, they can come to us and like to partake in our experiments. But we haven't yet brought all of our ridiculous equipment to the field to track elusive hummingbirds with saber-tooth bills.
That makes sense. I love that that's a thing. So what we know is that in some places it's evolved several times. There's several species that have some version of weapons on their bills, which maybe is a trade-off with feeding, meaning it makes them less good at feeding, but maybe better at getting ladies.
And as a good scientist, I have to throw a grain of salt in this, because this is a theory, right? Everything is a theory until we back it up with more information. So far we have seen these hummingbirds like poking each other, biting each other. So the dagger would function to pierce, right, when they poke each other. The backward serrations would function to increase the friction when they bite each other and pull. They
do that too?
They're mean.
Yeah. But again, there are theories that this is one theory. This is our theory. There are other theories that explain why hummingbirds have evolved these traits, like the backward serrations. There is a theory that says that they use it during nectar robbing. There is another one that says that they use it for preening their plumage, like little combs. And all of these, is out there, and now it's up to us to design experiments to tell apart these theories.
And so the reason I made faces when he said those theories, was because some of these things, if they were important for like normal life of a hummingbird, then you should see them in both males and females. So we're seeing just males have them, not females, and that not all males have the same quality. So you'll have some males with really big weapons and some males that are kind of like punier weapons. And so that makes us think that it's something about male-male competition and not just like all birds need it to survive. But if it was something that just helped your feathers, then shouldn't females have it too? So
yeah, that seems like a solid hypothesis, at least.
You could argue that males need more brighter plumages and impress more. And there is another theory that says that these are used to catch prey. So I mentioned that I studied how they hunt spiders. But what I found, so that was my honors thesis when I was finishing undergrad. And that's why I went to study at UConn, but that's a separate story. The fact is that females are the ones that hunt more substrate prey, such as spiders and other, little bugs that you have to grab with the bill tips. And the males hunt by like hawking or fly catching, which is, like there is a bug flying like that, and then hummingbirds would fly to it and open their mouth really big and then just like swallow it, like engulf it. So that doesn't match that dimorphism. The dimorphism is expected exactly in the opposite direction. That that we would predict.
If females doing all the hard work, then they would need more.
Females do all the hardworking hummingbirds.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
In many species.
Many species.
You said that male would impress the ladies, but I mean, the males attack everything. They'll attack females too. They're not nice, 99% of the time to females. Maybe for a split second they're nice, but they're just defending their territory. They're
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. I don't even think I knew that there were, this is going to sound really dumb, I didn't know there were hummingbirds that didn't eat nectar. And I let the spider thing go by because I was too busy thinking about you discovering spiders.
All hummingbirds drink nectar, and all hummingbirds need protein, so they all catch insects. So they spend half their day drinking from flowers and half their day catching insects of a certain size. A nesting female needs more protein than a male who's just screaming and fighting all day long. So
it would be pretty hard to give out of soda only.
Right.
Oh, yeah, I know. I just never, clearly it doesn't make sense, but I just never thought about that. Fascinating. Yeah. Well, I have a couple of more questions for you, and then we can get to questions in the Q&A. So a couple more minutes for everyone to put their questions in there, and we'll get to those, save the last 10 minutes. So kind of transitioning a little bit just to wrap up this part. I love that you've done all of this stuff. I love that you are both professors, you work a lot with students, you take students in the field. And I also know you're involved in a lot of outreach. What does that look like? I know the nature documentaries and the writing for the conversation, which I put a link in the chat. What other outreach are you doing? What are you up to?
Okay.
So we've been not just in documentaries, but we did a recent TED Ed video where we helped write the script on hummingbirds at flight. And so that is on YouTube, and it has, millions of views. So that's sort of like translating science into, more accessible, especially if it's got cartoon animation going along with it. So there's been that sort of YouTube things. Alejandro's looking for something here.
I'm looking for a slide that sort of like summarizes some of the exciting outreach that we do, and I would say that part of it is to reach a wide variety of audiences, such as, let me pull this up. The youngest audiences are the best to reach in my mind.
Oh, this is cute.
If you like the moment I realized that you could teach math by talking about hummingbirds, then I was like, oh, maybe this is worth doing.
So this is in a kids magazine, I forget which one, but they can do all the calculation of Scholastic magazine. They can do all the calculations about heartbeats, wing beats, drinking, and weight. Just, we give them the data and they can actually calculate it. And so it's a fun way to get students of any age involved, and they can calculate these things themselves.
Yeah, and then it starts with the publicity that our papers get, and one of the cool things is that this has been translated into over 20 languages, and many countries, and this helps to reach the public everywhere. And my most favorite examples of this is what Kristiina was mentioning, like these learning resources, the educational outlooks that we have, to use this research to connect to how this interest about hummingbirds can teach different concepts that are useful for future voters and all that can change our world.
And so I don't know if we'll share links, but we have multiple videos in the New York Times, for example, on the tongue, on the fighting. And so they have lots of videos you can see. If you've been trying to imagine these and you want to see them better, there's lots on the internet you can find, luckily.
That's really cool. So hummingbirds, not just a cool animal in your backyard that also somehow eats spiders, but they're a great tool of science communication and getting kids into science and tricking them into doing math, apparently. So way to go, you guys. Way to change the next generation for the better. I have one kind of final wrap-up question for you before we turn to the thing, just to kind of bookend our conversation about natural history. I feel like time has flown today. This is wonderful. Okay, so kind of coming back to the concept of natural history, which permeates your work in such a wonderful and clear way, and I love that. And yet, I know, having a science background also, that natural history is often very much looked down on by science as just like too simplistic, not relevant. Would you like to speak to this?
I think that for a while was definitely a widespread conception, which I think fortunately is changing, at least in some spheres. So in the sphere of organismal biology, I think like now when I talk to colleagues in conferences or like in casual conversations, this is being reappreciated now that we all understand that if you keep doing research in a lab or keep doing research, like outside nature in any way, and you don't connect that to what animals do or what is really important for the animals, then it's kind of losing its track. And I think natural history is what keep us like focused on the right thing to keep studying. So I think it's changing for the better.
And I think whenever Alejandro shares these crazy technology he develops to see inside the bill or see inside the flower, they're always paired with, like, we saw this first in the wild. We first filmed birds drinking flowers in the wild in some random place. And that got us to this. So it wasn't that we just would have thought of it on our own. We were just trying to imitate nature the whole time.
I love that. I love that it's very much framed in your questions. And so you're taking it out of the lab and more back into nature. Thank you for answering that. We have a whole lot of questions, so let's see if we can get to some of them. And even a question from YouTube. Thank you for translating that. We're going to start. I'm going to go to the top here. Alejandro, of all the animals you've studied, what was your favorite?
Oh, well, I would have to go with hummingbirds because they just be waking up every day. So
love
yes.
that. Love that. Thank you so much. Okay, do hummingbirds have a mechanism for tasting what they drink? Do they have taste buds?
Yeah, they have taste buds, but at the base of the mouth, not in the tongue. Again,
So they have to sip it first.
So you have to sip it. So Kristiina has been doing some behavioral experiments, and they have to drink it first, and if they don't like it, they shake their heads, and then they just keep
spit it out.
Yeah.
And I just give them plain water, but they don't like that.
Yeah, they like.
I'm picturing like when you go to a wine tasting and you like roll it around your mouth, and they're like,
they're like, dying.
Yeah. So
I don't know if you're supposed to go.
Get the tongue all the way into the liquid, bring it all the way in, and then they can decide what concentration they want. So it's not remember the tip of the tongue has no nerve endings, nothing.
And interestingly, a researcher, a collaborator, has shown that they have co-opted the umami taste receptor to taste sugar. So they ancestrally lost, when they were dinosaurs, they lost, well, they are still dinosaurs, but you know what I mean? That clade lost the ability to taste sugar the same ancestral way. So they evolved a new way to taste it by using now the umami receptor. And so there is a lot in the internet about that if you want to, read about it.
Oh, that's a good question.
Her name is Maud Baldwin, the researcher that studies this. I collaborate with her in many different projects.
Oh, that's fascinating. Here's more tongue questions. How does a hummingbird's tongue work compared to a butterfly's proboscis? Are those different or the same?
Yeah, so like butterfly proboscis could suck through that long tube with this called a cibarial pump. So in their heads, they have this organ that can open and close, and that's more like suction, like what we would do through a straw, because the hole is the tube is hollow all the way through. But hummingbirds cannot use the tongue as a straw, so they have to do it this complicated way around, which is squeezing the bill with the tongue, and then moving the nectar back. I can pull out a video in the meantime.
Yeah, because there's also a question for someone that wants to see an illustration of the actual mechanism of the tongue feeding. So I'm going to paste into the chat. Here's your lab website for folks to go look at the ecophysics lab, and I think some of that might be linked there.
Right.
And in the meantime, go ahead.
I don't know. I have received like warnings that the website is down now, but Alejandro Rico, my personal website, should have those links as well. So
okay.
Here is the.
You got to go to share.
Here's the video.
Yeah.
So here is sort of like a summary. This is from an edition of National Geographic. Oh,
sorry.
An edition of National Geographic that had the, that was talking about our research, and it's a modified video. So I superimposed this to explain the mechanism inside. So, but this is like a video summary in which you can see how the tongue splits in two, like I was mentioning, and this is the cross sections of that tongue, showing how it's compressed and then expands and then grabs the nectar. And here in blue is sort of like how the nectar would travel through, and the base of the tongue is actually what drags the aliquot fluid for them to swallow it. But yeah.
And if that was all too fast, I understand. Don't worry. Usually he explains that for like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Pieces, but.
Oh, that's cool. I love that you can just see I see what you're saying about the snake tongue. That was that helped me picture it, because then I'm like, and I pasted the link to your main website in the chat too, so folks can go check that out. More questions. I think that's the last tongue question that I'm seeing. So let's get to some bill. Oh, wait, here's a genome question that lots of people have liked. Okay. Hi, Richard. Richard Neville asked, I'm still a little obsessed with the idea that hummingbirds have such small genomes. Am I understanding that this might be an adaptation to enable the animal's blood cells to be small? How small are the genomes compared to those of other birds? How small are the red blood cells compared to other birds?
Right. So that's not my specialty, unfortunately. So I know that they have the smallest genomes. I know that their cells are tiny, but everything on them is tiny. And so the exact comparison, I wouldn't have those at the top of my head, but there is a lot of we can search for the papers. If you just type in Google, like the smallest bird genomes, hummingbirds, then you could go on that track.
Conversely, salamanders have one of the largest genomes. We want to go the other way.
Next
fight.
Seminar, right, with Mark.
That's cool. Okay. So Geraldine wants to know why. Oh, I think we answered this. Why do some hummingbirds need a weapon on their beak? What is their enemy in South America, not North America? And I think your hypothesis, if I'm understanding, is it's males fighting other males, most likely, perhaps.
Like one hypothesis is then like why that has evolved in South American hummingbirds and assemblages is because there is way more hummingbirds fighting with each other. So in North America, there are usually fewer species interacting with each other. But here, at our station, you see many different species just like constantly, vying for the access to a resource. And in that case, if one of them has the advantage, even if it pays the cost for it, the cost, could come from the reduced efficiency, is worth because you would have dominance over the rest of the hummingbirds in that area. So in complex communities, usually you have more adaptations that, could be beneficial in simpler communities.
Here's a related question is from Norma Miller. Is it possible that hummingbirds are found fighting in what could be thought of as a hummingbird lek or arena during a pre-breeding season where they're all showing off for the ladies?
Yeah, you want to take that one?
So Alejandro also studied that in Costa Rica in a long-billed hermit. And there males have little territories where they just call all day. And he found that the males in the middle of this arena, so of the lek, had pointier and stiffer bills so they could hurt more than the males outside. So he got there when they had already settled themselves into little territories, but we assume that they fight and then they can get the best territory by having the best weapon. So he could compare males on the outside, which is not as good. The females don't like that, versus the males in the middle. And so that's where he could see, we could assume that that's what's happening, is that we're getting this difference in the males.
Yeah. So unfortunately, I couldn't, find the exact slide, but there is a Nature documentary that talks a little bit about our works in leks. And yeah, so they have these.
It's called Super Hummingbirds on PBS Nature.
Yeah. So is the part that talks about the work of our collaborator Marcelo Araya. He lives he's from Costa Rica, and the work we did there showed that there are these places in the forest that function as how you call it, bachelor
Singles bar?
Singles bar, yeah, there you go, singles bars. So
bachelor farms. What I call them.
And they just sing all day. But to get a place as a seat in the bar to sing, they have to fight for it, and that's why the males have the weapons. And there are other males that have like less developed weapons, and they are the ones that are in the surroundings, like not really getting a seat in the bar, but then they may have other strategies to reproduce.
And then the cool thing about Lex is the male's not offering the female any territory. He's not like giving her flowers or parental care. He's just showing off his quality and his good genes, we assume. So the females know where to go and where to find the males, the different qualities, and so they can make a choice, but they don't get anything else out of it.
Ugh. Farm candy. Well, are you guys okay to hang out for a couple more minutes? We've got a couple more good questions in the chat. If you all need to go, you're welcome to leave. I'm not going to hold you here. This is being recorded, so it'll be available on YouTube if you want to catch the end. But I want to ask these last couple questions because there's only a few good ones here. Okay, are the bills on hummingbirds covered with skin to allow them to feel the depth of the flowers? Is that true?
So the surround, like, they have bones inside, and what is surrounding those bones is what we call rhamphotheca, which is just keratin. So there are layers of keratin, and how much filling in that keratin there is needs to be studied. Many species have vascularized bills because, as we are discovering, they can use it for thermoregulation as well. But to which degree they can sense. So other birds with long bills, like kiwis, that has been shown to be, or shorebirds that put the bill deep inside and then can feel vibrations and then get the prey. Those organs haven't been found in hummingbirds, but the amount of sensation, it's still unknown. We believe that the flexibility is related to this trade-off between making it very useful to poke versus very flexible to squeeze the bill, the tongue, sorry. But yeah, like how much they can feel, we don't know.
That's a great question, because we see them dive into a flower or artificial feeders, and they reposition, and they seem to really know what they're doing, but we don't really know how they do that.
Oh, that's fascinating. Here's a couple of related bill questions. So if a hummingbird, and I think they go together, if a hummingbird injures its beak, can it heal? And we have a question from a viewer on YouTube who says, how much damage do the bills actually do?
Yeah, so going back to the leks that we studied in Costa Rica. So we would band those hummingbirds with, tiny little
The
wings
tiniest little bit.
so that we could track them during the years. So we would go back the next year and see how the dynamics have changed. And in one of those, in the middle of the breeding season, one of the males that we got on a net at the beginning of the field season, we took pictures and everything, and he was like super strong, super sharp dagger. And then it was strange that we just stopped seeing it in the middle of the season, and then we caught it in one of the nets that was outside of the lake, and the bill tip had broken. So you could see in the photo how the dagger had just broke off, and then that was like immediate ejection from the singles bar. So we were very sad about that male and everything. But then we went back next year and we caught it in I think it was a different lake, but it was still in the middle of the territory. So one of the central territories, which are the best. And the bill was perfect, like if nothing had happened. Like if we wouldn't have banded that hummingbird, we would have never guessed that something happened to the bill tip. So this is something new as well. Like we didn't know that they had the ability to reshape that part of their bill perfectly after at least a year. I know it probably was faster than that, but
that's so
they
cool.
can heal.
And then talking about how much
damage
they can inflict. I mean, we don't ever catch hummingbirds very easily, especially when they're fighting. So it's hard to say, like, what are they doing to each other? But, we can do little perforation tests, and these bills are very sharp, and they're constantly, flying full speed into each other and stabbing and trying to rip out feathers. And, so you can imagine they could do some damage, but it's hard to actually quantify that.
Right. Anecdotally, when we get museum specimens, what you do is you prepare them as a skin, and you could see that in the chest of these males of these species, the sparkling violet ear, there are like little,
like stab wounds,
like scars, yeah, like little holes. So we don't know that if that's caused by other males poking at them. We don't know. It's just like we have videos of them doing it. We have the skins perforated. Now, what is the connection there? Well, to be tested, I guess.
And unfortunately, when hummingbirds fight, it's, as you've probably seen,
so fast,
lightning speed, and it goes far. So we have not been able to actually film really well how they fight, because it's just by chance if we'll get a good fight. But usually they, fly super far away and the fight continues. And so it's really hard for us to capture.
I can't wait to see your episode of Planet Earth that you're someday going to film. I'm ready for it. So just call me when you're ready. Okay, a couple more. In general, what percentage of hummingbird diet is insects and spiders? Are there various species, or are they all generalists? And how about for the Connecticut hummingbirds?
What was the last part of the question?
Oh, sorry. Specifically for Connecticut hummingbird, the one hummingbird in Connecticut, do they also eat spiders and stuff?
Yeah. I mean, all hummingbirds need protein because the flowers that have adapted to be pollinated by hummingbirds have eliminated a lot of other traces of amino acids and other things that, interestingly pollinated flowers that are pollinated by insects have. So pretty much they have gotten rid of everything but sugar. So they only offer sugar. So to supply their diet, they to balance it out, they need protein from insects or spiders, so arthropods in general. And it has been shown that usually the females are the ones that hunt more specifically spiders and do so more during the breeding season. So spiders, being predators, are higher up in the food chain or the food web, and they have richer content of nitrogen, which is better to develop the eggs and feed the chicks. So they're really targeting spiders, while males are more generalist, and that also could be related to how they usually spend their time. So males being territorialist, or being in a place and trying to defend each other. I tried not to use too much of anthropomorphic terms, like we call it territory, but maybe something different for them. But they perch and they look around to keep their surroundings without intruders, competitors. And while doing so, they see a fly going by and then they just catch it, right? While females are more like exploring the forest. They're more like what we call trapliners, another anthropomorphic term. Just moving a lot, just traveling through the forest, feeding on different flowers, scattering the landscape. And while doing so, they have the chance to go after spiders in their explorations. So about Connecticut particularly, I don't know of any study that has looked at the differences of the ruby-throated hummingbirds, but yeah, I mean, when I did it for my honors thesis, it was just binoculars and a notebook. So anyone on natural history, right? Just go out and do it.
So now
Call Alejandro, I'll call if you find out.
When they do a little fly like that and they come back to their perch, that is when they're fly catching.
Like a loop-de-loop?
Yeah, they go up and they fly and they come back. And so it's not the same as, some West Coast hummingbirds, and they're doing their display dives. Those are really, really high when they do a U-shaped dive. It's like on a perch and they just kind of fly up and come back, fly up and come back. And that's when they're flying.
So report back to us, everyone, if you see this behavior. That's cool. Here's a hummingbirds as dinosaurs question. How big could a hummingbird get? What is the limit to that physics? Should we be scared of the saber-toothed hummingbird? I added that part.
Nice. So the largest hummingbird is an outlier. So if you see all the distribution of weights of hummingbirds stops, like around 13 grams or so. But then you have a hummingbird that is, like from 20 to 30 grams, which is called the giant hummingbird. And that's only found in southern to, mid South America. And it's super weird. Like it beats its wings very slowly. Usually the frequency of the wings is like about 60 hertz, 60 times per second, so really fast. But this one, you can see it almost in slow motion because it's only 20 times per second. And it just doesn't look like a hummingbird. It's just huge, moves slowly, but there it is. It just migrates all up and down South America. Is super successful. But I think that's probably, we don't know if it's the upper limit or just what has subsisted so far. But I don't think they would get much larger than that.
But it's probably very hard to do that figure 8 hovering flight. And so if you're much heavier, then that could be a reason why we have a limit on hummingbird size. Also, just collecting enough calories in the day. There's lots of things we could think about in terms of what limits hummingbirds.
That's great. There's a couple of folks in the Q&A. You guys have a lot of great questions. I'm afraid because of time, I'm going to ask only 2 more, and I'm sorry. If you have follow-up ones, you're welcome to email me, Jessie@naturalhistoryinstitute.org, and I'll forward it and see if they can get them. But 2 final questions. So Verge wants to know, do hummingbirds have olfactory receptors to smell a flower or nectar, or is it only by taste? That's a really good one.
They can smell, so they have a sense of smell. However, when you compare the flowers that are pollinated by hummingbirds with the flowers that are pollinated by insects, for instance, they are not as smelly, or even the ones that are pollinated by bats. So flowers that have evolved to be pollinated by hummingbirds rely on visual cues, not as much as smell. So that could lead us to an inference that the smell of the flower is not as important for locating the plant, but they travel so fast that guiding themselves by smell maybe not as efficient, but they have really good vision, so they can pinpoint the resource visually, and they're diurnal. So although another crazy fact there, hummingbirds belong to a clade of mostly nocturnal birds, and they
just drop them at the end.
They're related to swifts who fly at night.
So flights, swifts and hummingbirds are the only diurnal ones. The rest of that clade are nocturnal birds. But even though that, like maybe was a later switch in their biology, they are very good with not only visual spectrum colors, but also UV. So they see the flowers using UV cues as well.
So, but they have the good search image for flowers, and they have a really good memory. So they will come back all throughout the day to the places they know, but they're also testing new flowers to make sure that, that might be something good. So I don't think it's that they're just very curious and finding new ways a lot.
Oh, I love that. Okay, one final question, just for time. I want to respect all of your time. Thank you to everyone who stuck around this long. What are some future directions for hummingbird research? I thought that was a good one to end on.
Oh, so many, so many.
How long can you talk?
I'm
gonna plug the research of one of our PhD students, Alisa Sargent. She's studying how they move around, and it's unknown. Like we have made a lot of inferences about, like the trap lining, for instance. Again, like we believe many of them make circuits in the forest, but to actually test that, you need to track them and follow them. And Alisa is developing these technologies to be able to actually track them spatially and bring data to these conceptions that we have, but we don't know if they're true or not.
Because right now we just see hummingbirds, we think like, oh, that must be the same individual all day long, but we really don't have any clue. But now we're getting to see from her data that like, oh, that individual actually flew all around the whole neighborhood and only came back a few times. So then who we thought was that individual is actually 20 individuals. We have no idea. So it's new data coming in, and we can start to know what they're doing in their daily lives.
Oh, that's fascinating. Amazing. Well, thank you to everyone who stuck around this long. Thank you for being here, Alejandro and Kristiina. It's such a delight. So great to see you both. Thank you for sharing your work with us. And I've dropped your links in the chat. And if anyone has any follow-up questions, you can reach out to me at the Natural History Institute and I can pass it along. Thank you everyone for being here. Like I mentioned at the beginning, this recording it's up on YouTube now. I'll trim off the beginning and please share with all your friends. So thanks so much. I hope you all have a great day.
Thank you so much. It was so fun to have a conversation.
Thank you for having us. Take care. Thank you for all the great questions. I love them.
Oh my gosh. Thanks for answering them all.
All right.
All right. Bye guys. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.